Sorry, Carlton King is a former Scotland Yard Special Branch and MI6 officer and the author of Black Ops.
I was undercover for Special Branch in a jihadi organisation.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to the Black Spy Podcast, the show that shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed governmental personal protection operations. But actually, what we really do in the round is we look at geopolitics at the macro and the micro. We look at these things that affect us, whether we like it or know it, on a daily basis, that the people whom we would see as being in charge and those that back them or those that control them, whichever way you want to look at it, what they do and how that affects us. The little people, the people on the ground, the people who suffer through the consequences or the thoughts, even the ideas, and definitely actions of the people in power. So today, I've got Dr. Rachel back on the show. Hopefully, we'll get the three of us together with our media queen on at some stage as well, Fergus Isaac. But today, we've got Dr. Rachel. So we're going to look at two factors involved in this geopolitical perspective, but we're going to narrow it down to the United Kingdom, really. Because what we're talking about is what is the rage for people who are interested in politics, and I guess if you listen to the show, you are, which is presently what did or did not, that's poor grammar, isn't it? What did or did he not know Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, what did he know about well, everybody's putting it down to the fact that Peter Mandelson, aka the Prince of Darkness, what did he or did the Prime Minister know about him failing his vetting? Now, I'm going to explain what vetting is as we go on, but I'm going to introduce Dr. Rachel first. So I'll explain the vetting process as I've been through it. And then we're going to talk around this system, because all these systems, let's be realistic, all systems are down to the human being. So there's an element there about how the brain plays into these systems and processes. So Dr. Rachel, without any further ado, your thoughts and feelings. And how are you, by the way?
Thank you very much. I am better than I have been. I've had a little bit of down health, I'm going to say, but the sun is shining, the skies are blue. So, since we don't get that very often in the UK, I feel like I can't complain about anything right now. But yeah, I think this current scandal, because it is a scandal, and I do believe that Keir Starmer said when he came into office, it was to be the end of all scandals, that his government wouldn't be embroiled in scandals.
He did.
But we seem to have been in wall-to-wall scandals for quite some time. This is possibly the only scandal that I'm particularly knowledgeable about. Just because of the behaviors involved, the psychology involved, but also some of the history. And I smiled when you sort of brought up Peter Mandelson's old nickname, the Prince of Darkness. And as a layperson, Carlton, we are the little people. As part of the little people population, I think I would struggle to trust Peter Mandelson with anything. He's never been sort of, a man that I would say, oh, he's got integrity, he's authentic, he is somebody who you could hold as trustworthy. He's got the the whole of the UK population and their, direction and well-being at heart. He's never been that person. So in this particular scandal, what's most amazing to me is that, the sort of the bypassing of anybody, sort of saying, well, really, this was a bit of a foregone conclusion because he's never been known to be the most, squeaky clean of politicians.
Yeah. Some weeks ago, on one of the shows, I did mention that on at least two occasions, Peter Mandelson was summarily dismissed from government. Now, I believe those dismissals have gone down as resignations,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
but they were dismissals. Um, Generally, when somebody who obtains protection in some format basically is moved from the role where the protection has been provided, and I'm talking about 24/7 personal protection now, carried out by used to be the special branch of the Metropolitan Police Service, so Scotland Yard Special Branch. Now it's SO1 Specialist Protection. But basically, when one received that very expensive product, what would happen is, and having run the office that provides personal protection at the level of making sure that individuals got it or didn't get it and were informed when it was being taken or whatever, I can speak to this personally. What would happen is they would change their cabinet role. So, in other words, the protection that they were getting previously has now been rescinded. What would then happen is that basically some weeks down the line, months down the line, whatever it might be, at the assessment level, somebody like me would have gone in and said, former whatever you are, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, whatever it is, assessment's been done, and we now believe that you are no longer at such great threat, and that protection can be taken away from you. So, the vehicle that you're driving around in, which is a police vehicle, police Jaguar, or now it's BMW or Merkel, whatever it might be, armored, etc. The officers that accompany you, the officers that make sure that your movements are all looked after. So you don't need to put your hand in your pocket to do anything. If you get on a plane, you're driven to oftentimes to the stairs of the plane and you walk up and the officers accompany you, etc., etc. All that sort of good stuff that goes with protection. That's now rescinded from you. And this is after a couple of weeks and that. So, and here's a little package. So if there's a problem, your local police in the first instance will basically come to you to the suite and look after you. So that's a process that basically runs through. So what you don't find is walk up to number 10, drive up to number 10 and then walk away from number 10. That has happened to the Prince of Darkness, which tells you the level of which that was, okay? So you may want to say resignation, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
So that in mind, would you not think that before appointing this person, and let's go a bit further back, a lot of the time what I used to do as well is when I used to go to embassies or whatever, or high commissions, if it's a Commonwealth country, the ambassador or the high commissioner is sat there and he's running his fiefdom. But in the back of each one of their minds, as a general rule, and I shouldn't speak for every career ambassador on the ambassadorial system. Well, you could call them civil servants, but really ambassadorial Foreign Office system. That in the back of each one of their minds, they're thinking to themselves, one day I want to be the ambassador to the United States, right? Because that's the most powerful country in the world. That's our closest relationship, and I want that. Paris is good, whatever, You know, Germany might be all right, but I want to be that. So they're all fighting for that top role. Or let's say the vast majority of them. They want that. So think about it this way. You bring in a guy, and let's say who has twice resigned, let's use that terminology from government, right? Who's always been given as questionable, in particular in terms of business, right? And you jump all of these career ambassadors, high commissioners. Let's use civil service. It's a wide berth for the name for civil service. It's really the diplomatic service. So all of these guys in the diplomatic service and gals who want that top role, you've jumped them all and you've taken the role in the United States. How does that make them think? So now if you're the Prime Minister ordering this process, or trying to, do you not take into account that all of your people in the diplomatic service have now had a scalp taken away from them that they clearly wanted themselves? Yeah. And you've given it to a two-time, what word can I use? Two-time, let's argue individual, let's use that terminology, individual, who twice has been moved from the role, right? As who's a politician. He's not a diplomatic a careerist. He's not in the diplomatic service. What does that do to the diplomatic service? When you listen to what Ollie Robbins said also yesterday, who was the head of the Foreign Office in terms of the
he was very careful to say though that he was only in post 1 week.
Correct. And this is what I'm going to say to you, because what he's saying is that when he got into the role, before vetting had been performed, it was already said that Mandelson will have the role. The role, in fact, had gone so far that the papers had already been sent to the United States saying Mandelson will have the role.
And he'd already had security clearing as well, hadn't he? To you know have
he hadn't
to get the
got
papers.
He hadn't got his vetting. Right, so let's
not
explain.
the vetting, but the clearance for the to get
let's
papers.
Explain that. Yeah. Sorry, let's explain vetting how it works.
Yeah.
And I'm old, so I'll go through the old thing. So basically, what you had is you had what they'd call, they come to the end of my career, they changed things around, and they had what you call an SC, security vetting, which was just basically if you want to be, your regular police officer would have security, just general security vetting. So you're just security vetted. Your regular soldier may or may not have that, might not even have that. Many of your politicians probably just got that. Some of them had nothing, to be fair. Because at the end of the day, one of the big problems is if you're a politician and you're voted into power, what you can't then have under the democratic process would be a situation whereby the Prime Minister chooses you to be a minister because that's what he wants to have as the person in his cabinet, who you know have been chosen by the public to be an MP, and the Prime Minister then says, I want this MP in my cabinet and I'll give him a ministerial role, him or her, a ministerial role, be it a higher or a lower junior role. What you can't really have so much is somebody to turn around and then say, oh, well, this person can't do that role based on a vetting system, because then you're undermining democracy, are you not? So basically, what they're basically saying is politicians generally are not vetted, really, right? They're not really vetted. They don't need to be, because they've got the role by dean of the public voting them in. And some people would never pass vetting if they had to do vetting, right? Just wouldn't pass it. But they could still be Prime Minister, right? This is one we need to understand. You can become Prime Minister because you've been voted to be an MP and because you're now the leader of your party. Let's make it concrete. Jeremy Corbyn, whom I actually rated, to be fair, but Jeremy Corbyn, if you looked into his filing, I'm not saying anything, wouldn't pass vetting, right?
Mm.
As it's perceived by the United Kingdom. Regardless of
Yeah.
what, you think about it, as the United Kingdom government perceives it, the vetting systems perceive it, he wouldn't pass it. But of course, he could have been the Prime Minister. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
because the public's voted now, and they've voted for him to be an MP. But of course, you put him up as the head of the Labour Party, and they would expect the head of the Labour Party becomes the Prime Minister. Right. So that's
Mm.
why you can push politicians aside with this vetting stuff, to be fair. So when you're looking at Mandelson, he's basically a politician and has been, right?
Mm.
So he may have had some sort of basic SC vetting. They now do this sort of vetting which people get who, work in schools or whatever, they get basic vetting. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about here developed vetting. Okay, now developed
Mm.
vetting is where what happens is the vetting officers, ex-police, ex-security service, ex-MOD sometimes, those are the general areas where they choose these guys from, or these guys put themselves forward to be vetting individuals. They're then going to go into your background of all of your life. And they're going to look at your
Mm.
family, and you're going to look at your parents, and they're going to look at your spouse, and they're going to look at your partner in the modern era, and they're going to look at any proclivities which would open you up to being, in any way, shape, or means, um, subject to potential for being obtained as an agent by a foreign power. And what I mean as an agent is
Yeah.
obviously an informant, a confidential informant for a foreign power. So an intelligence agency couldn't say, "Oh, we got this on you, and therefore you're going to work for us," supposedly.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, ironically, it appears that in fact is what happened to Mandelson.
well, this is why you hear me say supposedly, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
And I said allegedly.
yeah. So so you're opening that way. You also look at various proclivities, and in the old days, example, if you were gay, that was enough for you not to
Yeah.
pass your vetting. Now, obviously, that isn't enough, but they might go into the lifestyle and what
Mm.
that lifestyle might mean. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is where you get your Epstein type of stuff coming in. Yeah,
Yeah.
to say, there's a question there. What's the background? Obviously not with females because Peter is gay, which is fair enough. But of course, so is Epstein. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah.
So what's the background there? Or people say he was bisexual.
Mm.
So what's the background there? And there's all the talk about how Epstein actually got his money in the first place because he was in a relationship with a guy who gave him a lot of the money, etc., etc. So you got to look at that, and all that should be looked into by a vetting,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And then who did you hang with in those days? Why? What was the back? What do we know? And then there's business aspects. So they're going to look into your business aspect. Where's your money come from? And this is where we come back to the two times previously, where let's say Peter resigned. So right,
Mm.
because that was on business processes, wasn't it? So or ostensibly on business processes. So again, you've got that aspect that would be looked into, and all that's put
Mm.
together. Now, what I understand from Ollie Robbins was before any of that was done, the Foreign Office were told by number 10, he's just saying number 10, whatever the process is, that number 10, in fact, he's going a bit deeper. He's saying number 10's private office. That's what he's saying. So read from that. Whether it's McSweeney, read from that what you will. Whether it's the top man, who knows? I don't know. And we're totally fair on this program. We always are. So what he's doing then is
Mm.
he's saying that basically number 10 is saying, well, does he really need vetting? And
Mm.
then it came down to the fact, according to Ollie Robbins, where they said, well, he does because the United States like people to be vetted when they do roles
Mm.
because their agencies want to talk to people who are vetted. And that's true. I've dealt with all of their agencies, or the vast majority of them, the primary ones, which you'll know of, from the CIA to the NSA to the FBI to whomever. And yes, and they all like to know that you are, vetted to the hilt.
Mm.
And by the way, DV is the hilt, right? There
Mm.
is nothing higher. It is the hilt. Okay. Now the strapping on top of that, strap one, strap two, strap three, but we don't need to go into that. The bottom line is DVing is the hilt, right? So that's you top vetted, right, to perform your particular role. And so you can, honestly say to somebody in the US, yeah, I've got the UK's top vetted, right? So you can tell me everything, no need to hide anything from me. If you feel you want to provide that information to us, by the way, because obviously the foreign government, they'll decide what they want to give in. But more importantly, in the other direction, we'll be giving to the ambassador most of our information that the ambassador may need to know in relation to the role of the United States and his job within the United States, which actually means the world. Because we're dealing with the US globally, and the US is a seat of power, and you are the ambassador to power, that is a global intelligence that you might get access to. You see what I'm saying? This is how serious this is. Not just what's happening in the United States, globally, how we're dealing with the US. Yeah. So, but they were saying, do we really need him to be vetted? You've got to ask yourself a question there, haven't you? According to Ollie Roberts, of course. Ollie Robbins.
Yeah.
So that's where we are with that. Now, just with that aspect alone, can you give me your sort of assessment on how that makes individuals think in two spheres? One is the fact that they've all been, if you will, jumped by this individual who twice has been looked at in negative circumstances. Let's use that terminology. So that's, the diplomatic service. How do you think mentally they will think about that? Secondly, how do you think that the United States, British agencies may think about dealing with an ambassador who is who was potentially compromised, let's argue. Yeah. So let's look at that. And then let's also look at why Ollie Robbins, or maybe talk more in detail on that, why he was so, what's the word I should use? So cautious, let's use that terminology, yesterday in defending his position, because after all, he's been thrown under the bus. He's been the one who's had his role taken from him. Why would he not have gone in more forcefully? I put those points to you.
Well, I think the first thing that's become really apparent, and you will know this having, worked in, sort of the backgrounds of politics yourself, is that there appears to be a kind of blurring of responsibility of there's quite a lot of nameless forces. There's quite a lot of almost seems deliberate confusion over timelines, over who was in charge when, over who spoke to who. And, it's very interesting from sort of a psychological perspective, or a kind of brain function, is when there's all this kind of confusion, when things are high pressure, high demand, high risk anyway, in that decision making often isn't the most sort of, I'm trying to say this in a really diplomatic, if you pardon the pun, way. Decision making isn't made with possibly the wisest of heads on the shoulder. That decision making tends to be made in sort of a high emotional state, which I think that's one of the things that you can sort of say about modern politics, is that it's very emotionally reactive. It's very animalistic. There's not, we're very much into short-termism, and that short-termism gets even more shorter with each, sitting government, really, in that there isn't anybody who I would say has got a sensible, insightful, considered, sort of, somebody trustworthy kind of decision-making responses. everybody is always on to the next thing, or what's the sort of popular subject today? What's it going to be next week? Because,
Can I just pick up on the
every,
pressure? Sorry, Dr. Rector.
yeah,
Can I just pick up on the
no problem.
pressure? Because I wanted
Yeah,
to look at the pressure, because this is what Ollie Robbins has mentioned, and it
yeah,
was also mentioned by Emily Thornberry, the chair of the committee.
yeah,
What they're basically saying is there was, now he didn't say constant, but he said there was a lot of interaction, and
yeah,
he particularly said from number 10 private office.
yeah,
Interaction that wouldn't have normally been the case.
yeah, yeah,
So he said they weren't specifically asking questions, but they were specifically saying, do we need vetting? Do we need this? Do we need that? We've already
yeah,
made it known. The king has already said,
yeah,
these are the diplomatic credentials, blah, blah,
yeah,
blah. It's already there. So in other words,
yeah.
that pressure to Ollie Robbins, and let me add to this. Let me add to this. He also mentioned, which I think he did on purpose, so you can talk to this. I think he
Mm,
also mentioned that he was told not to tell the foreign secretary, whom after all
mm,
is in charge of that politically. You know,
yeah,
Ollie Robbins works to him politically, if you will. So he's in charge
yeah,
of that whole, and he was told, don't tell the foreign secretary, right?
yeah,
David Lammy, don't tell him, and don't tell David
yeah,
Lammy that one of the people being looked at for this position in the first instance, that position that was picked up by Peter Mandelson, but also that the Prime Minister's Director of Communications was being looked at for that role, if not for another
yeah,
role within the Foreign
yeah,
Service. So what I'm saying
mm,
is, but don't tell Lammy, right?
yeah.
So again, what does that do to an intermediary at a very, very high level? And the only next person up to him, you would argue, is going to be that politician, Lammy. Yeah,
Yeah.
before it goes. What does that do to him mentally when he's been told, don't tell Lammy?
Well, the first thing is that what it shouldn't have done is made him feel under pressure.
Right.
Civil servants are there to be the consistent sort
Correct.
of workhorses of the government, no matter which government's in. They're meant to just basically be there to carry out policy and procedure in a way that is for the best of the British people.
Yep.
They're not there to get caught up in drama or politics, with a big P. Do you know what I mean?
True, true,
They're,
true.
they should actually be immune to that. It shouldn't matter, what any kind of private office or any kind of special advisor or anybody who has any kind of political leanings that are not maybe as transparent as they should be. None of that should matter. But I think it's indicative of sort of the human condition in that you know yourself what it is like working for government in any kind of department. And when you have done scandal after scandal after scandal for so long, you kind of get caught up in all of that and you forget that what you should be doing. So for me, it wouldn't matter how much pressure is being put off an individual from an office. You've got due process to follow, due diligence, due process. This is for the British people. This is to ensure that there can be no compromises made in this position. That we're protected as much as we could be in this position. And it's almost like I don't take that as a reason. It's part of the background. And if you are that high up in the civil service, like you are the only person above you is, the politician, the Secretary of State, then it's a pretty poor excuse really to say, well, we're under pressure. The pressure coming from an office
But
was
but can I
because
can
to
I
me,
can I play
push
the
back on
devil's
that.
advocate? Can I play the
Yeah,
devil's advocate? Okay, so let's go into the agencies that I'm familiar with. So the police, which is
yeah,
independent of government, yeah, supposedly independent of judiciary, etc., and works to whatever the laws are
yeah,
that, excuse me, that, that that are in statute that it's got to deal with. So it's working to the law, right?
Yeah.
The Secret Intelligence Service, so MI6, it's working to government because it's got its priorities handed to it as the external body, and government
Mm.
say, we want to know this, this, and this about foreign lands or whatever, or protect us from this, this, and this. The security service, MI5, again, meant to be independent from government, analogous to the police, but not exactly the same, because police is pretty much specific to the law of that. But again, orientated to working independently. So these are the agencies, I know them very well, all of them, worked in at least two of them fully, um, and worked very, very closely with the third for 30 years. What I'm going to say to you is, yes, you've got that position, but that line is blurred. Now, it might not be blurred for the, yeah. If you look at the regular 80%, 85% of police work, it's probably not blurred. It's pretty much, this is what the line is. This is what you want you to
Hmm.
do. The role that I was in, which is, for want of a better word, a kind of a political police, secret police, whatever terminology you want to use. Um, so you're looking at how politics are dealt with and how politically it affects the United Kingdom. There does become sometimes a juxtaposition as to whether, yes, this person may have committed an offence. You know that the offence has been committed, but it may be advantageous to have the person still perform the role, even though you
Hmm.
have that knowledge. And therefore, so let me make it concrete. So, example, you swear allegiance to the Queen as it was then to the King now in your role, not to government, etc. But you know that the Queen's art inspector is or was a Soviet spy. Okay. Now the security service know that, and you know that in the special branch, if you're in that working in the sections that might know it, because the security service don't bring anybody to court. They can't do. So spies are all prosecuted via the police, by the special branch, yeah, as are terrorists or whatever else. Okay. So the prosecutor.
Mm.
So you know this information because you may have been working jointly on a task force, say, with the security service on this issue, because most things come into policing aspect somewhere along the line. And so it's agreed that this person will not be brought out into the light. Yeah. This person will be allowed to carry on, even though they've committed one of the most gravest of crimes, you could argue, which is working against your state. And the person's
Mm.
left to do their business. And then, subsequently it's brought out, maybe they're dead or something, or times and it's spoken about. But this person's never paid a price for it. So what you're saying is really what the police should do, and that's the special branch part of the police should do, is say, no, we're putting this fellow in front of a court because he's
Mm.
committed a crime against the statute in the United Kingdom. He's committed foreign espionage, blah, 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 blah. But you don't,
Mm.
right? So that's what I'm saying. It's not always black and white. And when you get to be the most senior police officer, so like the commissioner, who may or may not have that knowledge, I would suggest he doesn't 9 times out of 10. Special branch underneath him might do, but he probably doesn't have people within the branch who doesn't. But he or she, they are also working to government, but in a different vein. Their vein is to get to be the most senior police officers. They know that government, in the form of the Home Office, is going to have to, and the Home Secretary is going to have to say they are good sorts. Yeah. So therefore,
Mm.
they don't want to do anything that blots their copybook. So they also spin towards the government of the day because of that. You see what I'm saying? It's not black and white.
Yeah,
The very
I see exactly what you're saying, and I'm saying that's what it shouldn't be like
correct.
because if you are a civil servant, your allegiance should be to the population of the United Kingdom.
But they will say it is. They will say
But
it is
it's not though.
advantageous that the popul it is
But it's not
advantageous that we
though.
don't do this guy because it would embarrass the royal family and therefore embarrass happens to be a cousin, therefore embarrass the Queen and therefore embarrass the United Kingdom.
But the
That would
thing
be
is
the
that
argument they would use.
sometimes, yeah, that is the argument. But sometimes, to actually rip the plaster off really quickly and admit that somebody, even if it was close to the royal family, has done something heinous and, you know, expose it, but this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to learn from it, is so much better for humanity as a whole, but especially a UK population, than the current system that we've got. From the perspective of, how people are feeling in the UK right now and how they felt for a while, whether people feel that they can prosper, whether people feel that they can trust institutions, whether people feel that they matter as a UK citizen, then the civil servants cannot argue that their current modus operandi is working because it's not.
I
It's,
agree with you. I agree with you.
yeah.
But I'm just putting the human element there because the human element surely, and you must have some um, psychological evaluation thereof, is surely they probably take the line of least resistance, don't they? This is what we've always done. This is how we've always
Well,
done it. This is how
exactly,
it's
yeah,
advantageous for
exactly
us to do
that.
it that way. And I now
Yeah.
believe this is correct because, the government didn't fall and therefore the Soviets weren't able to do whatever, whatever, whatever. Or we can argue that the fella's no longer involved. He was involved 40 years ago, but he's no longer involved now. So let's let him roll. Or we've fed, duff information to our enemies via him. You know what I mean? You can find a whole load of reasons for
But
arguing it.
yeah, you can always wait. So the human behavior, the brain, you're right, the path of least resistance, because it's very energy expensive to do something different. You can justify everything that you would want to, there's not one thing, one behavior, one act that a human being would not try to justify if it got them out of trouble, hard work,
Mm.
tight spots, whatever. You can justify anything, but what I'm kind of saying in terms of all of this, when you listen to the committees, when you watch Prime Minister's question time, for me, it's pantomime constantly. you know, there's nothing of real substance. There's no integrity. There's no actual consequential thinking. Like, what is going to be the long-term harm done to this country because of decisions made? Lessons are never going to be learned. We have things that, come out in the media, and it's a shame Fergus isn't here because, she could bring her element to this. You know
Correct.
that when something
Correct.
comes up in the media, when the Guardian found out about, this disparity over the vetted, it was for a reason and it wasn't for good. It was for another reason. Because we only get to find things out when it's that part of the pantomime coming next, don't we?
Correct. In fact, funnily enough, great minds, or maybe not great, but anyway, you got me because what I was going to say was this: the media oftentimes obtains a lot of this information, right,
Yeah,
and plays along. Now, some of them might say, okay, well, there's a D notice slapped on it, so we couldn't say anything. I mean, in days gone by, that's probably more so than it is today.
mm,
But more importantly, what you'll find is that the media moguls, the people owning that media, have a vested interest in letting things be known or
yeah,
not letting things be known.
yeah,
Is it that they hold it back in abeyance for subsequent use when they need it? So, example, when Leveson 2 should definitely happen it just
mm,
disappears.
mm,
When a an extremely capable and decorated editor takes a stand, okay, the doc in English, but Americans listen to, take the doc, the stand, in a court of law and turn around and say, I didn't know the information we got on this particular thing came from, whatever that might be, came from the fact that the mobile phones of individuals were being read. And generally that
mm,
was their messages. But, we could go on. They may have even gone further, but we're talking about messaging, is what they said was the case. So my understanding, having spoken to several editors of actually much lower down newspapers, not as capable as the Oxbridge educated individual who was put forward. My understanding is that an editor, particularly if you've got stories about royals or you've got stories about, and this is what exactly, again, Fergus should have been here, because we're also now coming into A-listers, yeah, who've got plenty of money, and other individuals with power, that
mm,
stories like that come out, that any editor worth their salt, I'm told by other editors, right, would say, where
mm.
do you get that from? Because anything that comes into this paper and we get sued for, I'm the one carrying the can as the editor. Now she stands
Yeah.
up in court as extremely capable and says, I didn't know where this came from. And then is still perceived as capable when you leave the court.
Mm,
So you can ask yourself a question, how does that work? So at what level of power is there being utilized to affect this sort of very skillful ice skating that allows
mm,
for the person to get off,
mm,
but still to look capable, extremely
mm,
capable, and to allow the newspapers to keep going the way generally they were, generally, not
mm,
fully, because Fergs would have told us that Leveson did make some changes, but
mm,
generally the way they were going. And the fact that they know these things
mm,
and the decisions are made. I
mm,
personally myself know of a circumstance, well, not just one, many, but I know of one circumstance at least, person, whereby something which would be of total interest to the public was not taken by newspapers because they didn't
mm.
want to. And
Yeah.
and my only understanding of that is because they liked having the knowledge that they could use
Mm,
at a different time. And when I say they, I'm
yeah.
talking about the people who run the newspapers,
Yeah.
the
I mean, well, that
czars.
that yeah, but that is, the current state of affairs. We've got all this current scandal, and from my perspective, it's like I'm thinking, well, what's being hidden around this current scandal? Now,
Yeah.
I completely understand everything that you've said, and and again, it's about sort of looking at the consequences of certain things, isn't it? It's kind of, is there somebody who thinks, well, what's the consequences of us withholding this information, or what's the consequences of us disclosing this information? But when there tends to be sort of disclosure of large proportions, like sort of the Levinson, stuff, and I'm just thinking of when I can't remember the name of it, but it was all the tax avoidance,
Panama
which the
Papers.
Guardian,
The Panama
yeah,
Papers, yeah.
Panama Papers, yeah, when even the stuff, the American guy who's now got asylum in Russia,
Yeah.
you know, it hits the public domain, doesn't it?
Mhm.
But what actually happens because of it? Are we
Well,
no longer spied upon by the security agencies? No, we're spied upon even more. You know, is there less tax avoidance? No, there's greater tax paying for the little people like me and you, Carlton.
yeah,
But the people who have the hereditary wealth or the great wealth, they've been able to hide it even more because of the Panama Papers.
yeah.
So you kind of look at all this, like, what's the consequences of this big hoo-ha in Parliament at the moment? What's going to be the
Well,
consequences?
let's look at the
No, but
Panama
who's
Papers.
surprised that, yeah, but
Uh,
who's surprised that Mandelson has been outed as for having nefarious contacts in the underworld of power?
right,
Who's
this is what this
surprised
this
at
is this is
that?
what I'm going to say though. You see, and I want you to
Yeah,
come at me on this one. I suggest to you that maybe the people who, well, Panama Papers for sure, who originally were bringing that out, were people who weren't tied to the, if you will, the what's the best terminology? The mainstream mass media. Let's use that terminology.
yeah,
Weren't tied to the mainstream mass media. So the people in the mainstream mass media begin to follow because somebody else has brought it through. So there's a thing people call the grey zone. They knock out a lot of stuff.
yeah,
And there's two or three of their top sort of reporters who were mainstream people before and know the game, but they collect a hell of a lot of information, right? A
yeah,
hell of a lot of information that when they put it out there, now you've got YouTube, etc. Although YouTube's been taken over, TikTok's been taken over, but they get it out,
yeah.
and when they get it out, then you'll find the mainstream mass media coming out doing, I guess, not a hatchet job on it, but a
No, it's
securing
control,
job.
isn't it?
Yeah, a controlling
Yeah,
job.
it's a managing control, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So
You know,
maybe
and
this came out because of that. That's what I'm trying to say. Somebody else
yeah.
had it, they knew it was coming through, so they jumped it quickly. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And but everything that's following, it literally is like the playbook of what happens. I'm really struggling to try and understand on what grounds Keir Starmer could sack Sorelli. Maybe you can tell us what on what grounds could he sack him on? To me, that's
Well,
a HR nightmare. Surely he's got all these years in the civil service. I'm presuming to rise to the top, he's got a pretty clean copy sheet.
yeah, yeah.
He's
Well,
only been in post for since 1 week in January, so not that long.
you see, this is wheels within wheels, I'm guessing. I don't know. Has has he been offered something? Has he
Well,
been
was that part of the game playing in the
Did he
committee when
get
he
his
said I can't
pension
comment?
early? Did he?
I,
Look, I don't
yeah,
know. I don't, and I wouldn't like to cast aspersions on the man's character. Did he? Did take this one for the boys and gals because it's not by no means a boys' game. It's a boy and
yeah,
gals game. Take this one for the boy and gals, and you'll be looked after down the line. Who knows? Look,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions on
I
anybody.
mean, and at the end of the day, David Lammy's been very quiet.
Well, of course, he's in the game as well.
He was very clever. Oh, I did notice at PMQs, he normally is a nodding dog.
Yeah.
He's normally like Rachel Reeves and is a nodding
Well, he was
dog to
thrown under
Keir
the bus by the
Starmer.
PM, wasn't he?
He literally he was the most frozen faced person I'd
Exactly.
seen on the
If
front
you
bench yesterday.
exactly look at the last PMQs, not this one. Look at last week's,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and the Prime Minister mentions him by name.
yeah.
It may be in PMQs, or it might be at the. If not the PMQs, might be at the. No, it was at Tuesday, Mondays.
Mondays, yeah,
Yeah, he mentions him by name, just kind of, just fleetingly, but putting him in the frame, suggesting maybe to Lammy, you might just want to sit this one out, mate, and not,
yeah,
and not say too much. Now, the other thing that we never touched on is, um, if it wasn't for this season, which is an electoral season coming up in what is it, 2 weeks' time?
yeah. 7th of May.
Yeah, right. If it wasn't for this season, I would suggest to you that maybe Lammy or others may have come at the Prime Minister with great gusto or with much more
Mm.
gusto. The only one that's done it so far was I think we spoke about it earlier, what's he called? One of the brothers.
Ed.
Ed,
Ed
Ed Miliband,
Miliband.
who basically was saying, well, he should have known, right? If he wanted to know, he should know. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, but you can listen to it. So because he's got nothing to lose, because he isn't going to be the prime minister, is he? He's already done. He's already been the leader of the Labour Party, and he's figured that nobody's going to vote him back in again. So he's been able to throw your man under a bus who you probably don't like anyway. So
Mm,
that's gone that way. But the others, they're thinking, last thing we want now is to get rid of this guy. One of us get put forward. You won't be able to get in pair, but one of us get put forward. Yeah. Even if Lammy
mm,
is a deputy and he takes over because your man resigns tomorrow. If Lammy takes over as deputy because your man resigns tomorrow and Lammy then takes it, and then you have a catastrophic, which you no doubt will have, election come up then, who takes the hit? Not
yeah,
Starmer, but Lammy. So
yeah,
who wants to put their heart, yeah,
yeah,
in the ring now? Come those elections, right? They'll hang it on, oh, well, the public didn't like him. We've got to change because the public say we've got to change, blah, 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 blah. You see, that's how
yeah.
it'll all be dealt with. Yeah. These
Mm,
guys are always thinking about themselves. No, wrong. I've known
yeah,
some who don't. I've known some who don't. So I don't want to, you know, paint everybody with the same bus. I remember one
yeah,
fellow saying to me, um, you know I don't play politics, Carlton. He said that to me. I said, you're a
yeah.
politician. He said, you know exactly what I mean. I said, yeah, I do. Because I got on very well with the guy. So we used to talk.
Yeah.
So
I
he
mean,
was not a
but
plain
this is the
politician.
thing as
But
well.
generally, most
You
of them
know,
are. They want the role.
well, and this is it. It's just like this scandal very much showcases the state of politics.
Yes.
I was talking with my husband a couple of days ago, and I was
Really?
like, yeah, I was talking with him a couple of days ago about all of this, and I said, do you remember Keir Starmer when he was going after Boris because
Yeah.
of, Boris had apologized for the parties. And every week, then there was like further disclosure
Mm.
of certain other things that was going on. And, it was like the drip, drip, drip effect.
Yeah.
Well, this has been similar. The drip, drip, drip effect. Every week he's having to apologize for yet another part of this puzzle that's been exposed. And, he literally was haranguing Boris to resign, so much
Mm.
so. And then he hung his own sort of prime ministership on, no more scandal. We're here to do a job. And, so I don't have bias. I actually look into sort of things. Am I just not seeing things? Has my negative bias in my brain just like got so much that I can't see any good that's going on? And the only thing that that has tempered some of this negativity is the final passing of the smoking and vaping bill. But
Mm.
that was actually put into existence from the previous government,
Yeah.
from the 14 years of shame.
Yes.
They put that into motion. So I'm just glad that but you look and you just think you had a mandate and that people actually wanted things to get better.
Mm.
We've had more scandal, which kind of seems worse because you're all po-faced and martyrs.
Mm.
At least with Boris's sort of set up, you kind of know he's murky. You kind of know that he has many fingers in many pies. But when somebody's been po-faced and constantly says, "Well, I was in charge of the CPS. My dad's the tool maker," all of these things, I'm one of you. He's so not one of us. It's just this whole thing is murky, and the UK is not in a better position than it was when they came in power.
Can I put
You
something
know,
else to you? Can I put something else
yeah,
to you? Because I'd like you to look at this from just your own position and then from the position of the brain. Looking at this scandal right now, okay, and I'm going to stick on this
mm,
scandal, looking because I want to end this in a simple episode on this scandal. Looking at this
yeah,
scandal right now, you're the Prime Minister. As we've said, there's a whole host of career diplomatic service ambassadors wanting that role. it's come down from your inner office. Don't tell the Deputy Prime Minister, Lammy, who's the Foreign Secretary at the
Mm.
time. So there's a reason for that, but that's been said. And he's gone on
Mm.
record saying that. The other thing is, note that he says quite a few times, I didn't take a record of things. So the question is
Yeah.
why, when you should be, actually. But
Yeah.
that's a question. But the point is this, it's coming down saying don't tell him. So you know that bit's happening. We want Peter in the role, right? When Peter gets the role, you walk hand in hand with Peter laughing down the corridors, blah, blah, blah,
Mm.
right? Mentally, is it possible for you not to ask the question, having been an individual who has had a role before in law, having been an individual who's crafted his way up through the Labour Party skillfully, not to have things stick to him, other than when he actually took power and you had Arsenal tickets,
Mm.
Arsenal in the VIP
Yeah.
stands. You had
Taylor Swift. Don't forget the Taylor Swift
glasses,
tickets.
Taylor
Yeah.
Swift, suits, etc. We can go on and
Yeah.
on and on.
Yeah.
We had apartment made for the sun, all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff that had gone on. So we've seen all that corruption. The reason why I bring that up is because surely from each of them you learn, think, oh, I can't get away with this sort of stuff. Is it then
Mm.
sensible for us to think that after all of that, and you then see Mandelson confirmed, that you don't ask the question, by the way, did that all go well with that betting and everything? I put that to you.
Mm. Yeah, I very much think so. It's almost like, we were talking about the newspaper moguls and the media moguls before. It's like, don't tell me how you got this information. I don't want to know.
So you think
Don't
it's
tell me how that
possible
happened.
then?
I don't want
So
to
you're
know.
actually saying it
Oh,
is possible.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
I think it's possible.
So
And I
you're
think
thinking
that
he
there's been,
knows the problem. So let me craft this fully because this is important for the show now. So you're
yeah,
saying he sent out all the feelers to the individuals, in his office, whatever, right?
yeah,
Private office. Find out about this, but don't tell me, sort of thing. He doesn't say it that
yes,
way, but he's actually gone out of his
absolutely.
way not to ever be told. Is that what you think happened?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah,
Is
without a
that a
doubt.
normal brain function, or is that?
Um, it's a functioning hubris for sure.
Right.
Um, because think about all the sacrificial lambs Keir Starmer has had.
Mm, mm,
There's plenty of people in his private office who have resigned or who he's let go.
mhm.
There's
So
been
you,
plenty of people
so you're
who is his
saying
fall guys.
he's
Yeah.
the king of basically deniability,
Yes. Yes. That's all he
plausible
does.
deniability. So that's what
That's
you're
all
saying.
he does. Look at it. Look at how he conducts himself at the dispatch box. Look at how he conducts himself in Parliament. It's never him. Never ever him. He
No, but you see, this is
apologizes
what I'm trying to
profusely.
make the
Yeah,
difference of with
yeah,
Boris Johnson, whom I fleetingly had some connection with. With Boris Johnson, um, he wanted to know because
yeah,
what I got from him was he wanted for you to understand that he knew everything. Right?
yeah,
That's Boris
yeah.
Johnson.
That's it. Yeah,
So he wanted to be the one, and the Teflon aspect of him was the fact that nobody actually came back on him. To be fair,
yeah,
but with this guy, what you're telling me is he's smarter than that. He basically sets something in train, but sits back. In your professional opinion, now, brother,
yes,
but sits back off it.
yes, yes.
Right. So he
Absolutely,
can say then,
absolutely.
hand on heart, I didn't know.
Well, he can say that, but do you know what? This sort of goes back full circle to how we started this episode. Who in the United Kingdom who is sort of Generation X and older, and some
Mhm.
of the older millennials, which of us would say that Peter Mandelson is trustworthy? So it kind of goes full circle. There
Very
might
true.
be
Very true.
plausible deniability, but in this particular scandal, But you have to look at how he maneuvers himself. He literally puts his full trust in people. So he almost acts the victim when
Right.
these people are shown not to be trustworthy,
Right.
not to have acted in good faith. He makes himself the victim. If notice, just listen to his language. Look at how he presents himself. He sort of backs off and go, well, I didn't know this person said that they were dealing with it, or this person that was their job, and that's
Right.
why they're in post. And I've apologized to victims. I've apologized to those who have been, affected by all this, and I'm truly, truly sorry. But that wasn't me.
So what
He
you're saying
never
is,
takes
I would have expected
accountability
that
or
they would have done
responsibility.
their job properly. That's what you're basically
That's
saying.
what,
And I don't
and
want to
he
micromanage.
he create. If you've looked at how he's set out his office at number 10, he's created. He's almost like the spider in the middle of a web. He's created departments. He's created teams that are there to protect him.
Gotcha.
So that will
Interesting.
do the dirty work that has to happen in politics because of how we live. It shouldn't do, and that's something that I generally get irate about is that politics should be about making things good for the people who live in that that country, that province, whatever.
Mhm.
It shouldn't be about servicing the rich and powerful. It shouldn't be. But we know
What
what it is.
what kind of personality is that, Dr. Rachel, um, uh, um, in your medical terminology? Plus, we just add to it, um, uh, how much do you think gaining wealth plays a part of this?
Gosh, of course, gaining wealth plays a part in it. We're part of. It's very apparent to everybody that we're in such a transactional society now that you only get what you need to be well, to be successful, if you have the means to do it. And it becomes, sort of very, self-serving around that. The kind of personality type that you'd kind of say that Keir Starmer is, it is a form of intelligence. It's adaptation. It's about being able to read the environment and, you know, have have people, have systems that enable you to be that successful you in that environment, and that's what he does. It's intelligent adaptation because no one ever holds him to account. No one. You know, even Ed Miliband peeking his head above the parapet, and I have problems with Ed Miliband just because of his line of politics. But here, he didn't even speak directly to Keir Starmer. He said, "I told David Lammy, I warned him about this."
Yeah,
So there's nobody. Keir Starmer kind of surrounds himself with people to protect him, doesn't he?
yeah, yeah.
You know that
Interesting.
that's how he does things. I'm presuming, you know, he's almost, if you will, sort of he knows how civil servants work because he used to be one, didn't he?
Yeah.
He knows how to build empires and do well. He knows how to be Teflon. He does. And he's got a different background to the likes of Boris. So he's had to create his own version of how he, outmaneuvers some of what goes on. But unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, there's not many people who think like I do. So most people probably get caught up in the scandal. It's just a shame that people are waiting for the right time to tell him to go. It's a shame that he hasn't got integrity to say, right, I've understood that my time has been embroiled by scandal, so therefore the right thing for me to do is for when we've got these local elections out the way, I will be tendering my resignation. But it's not going to be until after the local
I
elections
mean, yeah, that's the way
to
around
have
it, of course, isn't
stability.
it? You
Yeah,
could do that. You
yeah.
could, but why would you as a PM?
Well, if you were the man
If
that
you're
you
in the
said you
modern,
were,
yeah, if you're in the modern age.
if you were who you said you were, then you
Yeah,
would. But he's
yeah.
not who he says he is, so he won't. And this is, why it gets frustrating to me that people don't call him out on it.
The other thing that I'll, in closing, the other thing that I'll mention is just the seductive power of the particular roles. I
Yeah,
know, don't
yeah,
get me wrong, the Prime Minister is not like a president. So the President of the United States is the Commander in Chief. The buck stops with
mm,
him. He
mm,
is also the top government officer. He is
mm,
also the head of state, etc., etc. So it's all in one. Whereas our prime
mm.
minister is actually, and this is something that I think that Trump, and we can do Trump next time, that Trump
Yeah,
hasn't understood. Because Trump, when Starmer said, "We won't aid you in the attack on Iran,"
mm,
basically, Trump said, he said to me, and he said it this way, he had to ask his team, what the hell kind of a
mm.
man is he having to ask his team? Because Trump thinks that he's a president and he can just say, I'm doing
Yeah.
it. Whereas they don't understand that the prime minister is the prime minister, the first minister amongst ministers, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The first,
Well,
so it's
yeah.
the
To be fair
collective.
to Trump, though, to be fair to Trump, Tony Blair pretty much did a unilateral
He did.
decision,
He
didn't
did.
he? So, to be
That's
fair
the
to Trump, I
difference.
can understand why he might have got a little bit mixed up in that.
Tony Blair, yes, he did, but we should never forget Brown.
Yes,
Never forget
yes.
Brown. So when you had Blair had, yes, he was acting like a president, but he always had Brown backing his
Backing him up.
position.
Yeah, yeah,
And people knew where you stood. And then a couple of others then within the cabinet who were movers and shakers, including the Prince, um, making
yeah,
things happen. So the point I'm making is that this is a collective position. You're the Prime Minister,
yeah,
and you've got to figure collectively. So, but nevertheless, and this is the point I was going to come to, I wanted you to just look at, it is seductive in terms of everything. Figure it
yeah,
this way. Let's argue he is a toolmaker's son. Let's just argue that. I know people say his dad owned the factory, but let's argue he's a toolmaker's son, right? He's a toolmaker's son, and he's a son of a nurse who had some, good job, but who had some health problems, and it was problematic for the family, and they were poor, etc. The story that he's given. Let's
yeah,
argue that's true. I'm not going to argue it isn't. Let's argue it's true.
yeah,
You then make your way through university. You do well. Nobody can take that away. You do well. You work your way through the system, and you become the head of CPS. Where really, and I spoke to you off, I was going to say off camera, but off mic, about the role of the CPS, about them never really having to take any responsibility for what they do,
yeah,
because all the work's
yeah,
done by the police. The
yeah,
bundles, which is all the papers they've got, are done by the police. The decisions they're making is we'll bring it in front of a court after the police have done all the work, and the police take on all the threats. So the reality is that even though that's the case, what you'll find is that you can kind of hide more because
yeah,
you're not going to be found negative for what goes
yeah,
wrong as a general rule. Because if it goes wrong, you just blame the police. If it goes
yeah,
right, then you'll stand in front and say, we did a great job today. We brought them in a court. We got 10 years of this person, whatever it might be, 30 years, whatever.
yeah,
Right. So, because, in the past, Sir Keir has said that while she were doing this, I was out fighting the nail bomber.
fighting
Well,
crime.
fighting
Yeah,
crime.
I've just got two words for that. Jimmy
I
Savile.
I stopped the nail, I
Oh
stopped the
yeah,
underpants bomber. No, you didn't. The police
yeah,
did that. You just put them in front of
yeah,
the court, right? After the police give you all
yeah,
the info. But so that's my gripe about that. But
yeah,
the fact of the matter is, so you've got that and you've worked your way up, and then you've got a nice little pension coming your way. But even though you've got to that level, which would be good for anybody, one would suggest. And this is why I'm bringing this up to you, because I want you to sort of look at the mental aspect of it from the brain. You've got to this role where you're the king of the castle of the CPS. You then get this position where you become the king of the castle of the government, not the state, because that's the king, obviously,
mm,
previously the Queen, but of the government of the United Kingdom. Still, relatively powerful, right? Some of that. You get that. You've played on the international stage because you've pushed yourself in there, involved in the
Mm,
wars, yeah, which
mm,
my belief is we shouldn't be involved in these wars in the Ukraine, etc. But we've pushed ourselves in, and so were there, and he's
mm,
now played a role in that, a suicidal role, I suggest, but we've played a role in that, right? Bosh, we've done
mm.
that. So you've done all that. So you've had the world stage. Wherever you go, you get in convoyed around. In Britain, you get the protection that, and when you go abroad, you get in massive convoys. You go to the United States, you're going to get a full presidential convoy nigh on. You're going to get all this bit going for you. You're going to have, we've now got a plane, UK1, which you should have had, and I agreed with that. I wrote a paper on it to say we should have it, and we've now got it. So you've got the creature comforts of UK1 aircraft, all of that. Do you want to give that up to come
Mm.
back to, don't get me wrong, even though you will have a good salary as a pension from the CPS, but do you want to give all that up to come back to CPS money? No, you don't. I think what
No, you
happens is
don't.
it
Yeah.
corrupts people and they think, how can I make? How I'm not saying this is what he's doing. How can I make? Now, we all know he can go on the Washington Speakers Bureau and make some money doing speaking around the world, which is probably what he will
Mm,
do.
mm,
But it's so seductive that you want that power and you don't want to give it up. I make the analogy to Muhammad Ali,
mm,
greatest boxer in the world, right? You could argue, had everything, perceived as the king, but he couldn't give up doing, and he didn't need the money, but he couldn't go up doing more and more fights until the end. It was
mm.
shameful and pitiful.
Yeah.
So you've got that, and then what happens is you turn around and you basically think, I'm going to have to give all this up. I'm going to stay
Mm,
on. As I said, with Muhammad Ali, I'm no longer champ. People aren't going to come up to me and say, hey, champ, I'm going to have to give it all up. Do you think
mm.
that's a powerful motivator of a lot of these people?
Yeah, of course it is. It power does a lot to the brain and but not just the power. It's like the emotional roller coaster is seductive as well. That high pace, the high pressure, the high stress, and making mountains out of molehills and constant drama. That again is very addictive and very powerful. Sort of needing to feel important, and having your identity connected with that. Very, very much so. And to be completely, sort of frank about this, his personality isn't so, he's not got charisma. He's not charismatic. He's not memorable. So for particularly for people like that as well, it's not as if he's going to be as sought out as other more charismatic ex-politicians are for the circuit. He'll not command as much. He'll get enough. He'll get a lot in comparison to what we could get, but he won't have the same accolade. He won't have the same power. He won't have the same respect as he would as Prime Minister. Because also, he's not going to be known for anything good, is he, from a political perspective? Tell me one good thing that he can be remembered as Prime Minister of this country.
Very true, very true, very true. And if this goes down, this will be the worst thing that he wants to be known for. So,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna have to call it a day. Fantastic assistance, more than assistance, fantastic knowledge provided there, Dr. Rachel. Um, let's see how it goes. Let's see what happens. Let's see if what we said is correct. Yeah. But what I would like you to do, Dr. Rachel, if at all possible, if next week you could come back and you could look at the famous orange one. Better
Oh,
known.
yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that might be a double episode for that
You
one.
could give us a feel as to where you see the mental aspects in your profession, how that relates
Oh
to
my
that gentleman.
goodness. Every day in America is like a South Park episode at the minute, isn't it?
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. That's fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for listening. Dr. Rachel's been on top of her game today, and hopefully, you've got some understanding of how systems work in the United Kingdom and maybe how individuals are orientated towards their activity, be they the Prime Minister, be they a former head of the civil service of the Foreign Office, or be they just lonely little me and less little Dr. Rachel. So, for me, see you again next week.
Oh, thank you for having me on, and I'll speak to everybody again really soon.
All the best. See you later. Bye-bye.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.